You show up on time. You meet your deadlines. You reply to messages quickly, keep your commitments, and by almost every external measure, you are doing well. And yet, there is a version of you that no one sees. The one that replays conversations at 2 a.m., searching for the thing you said wrong. The one that cannot sit through a quiet evening without manufacturing something to worry about. A task undone, a relationship to audit, a future scenario to stress test against every possible outcome. The one that says yes to things it doesn't want to do because the alternative, the guilt, the fear of disappointing someone, the low hum of what might happen if you say no, feels worse than the exhaustion of saying yes. You have never been formally diagnosed with anything. You have never felt like your anxiety was serious enough to warrant professional help. You function. You succeed. You are, by most people's definition, fine. But high-functioning anxiety is not fine. It is a specific, identifiable pattern of chronic psychological overactivation that operates invisibly beneath the surface of competence and capability. And it is one of the most underdiagnosed and underaddressed mental health experiences in the modern world, precisely because it wears the costume of success. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what high-functioning anxiety looks like from the inside. 7 specific signs that most people have spent years dismissing as personality traits, work ethic, or simply the price of being a responsible adult. Each one is grounded in clinical psychology and neuroscience, and together they form a picture that is, for many people who watch this video, the first time anyone has named what they have been experiencing. Stay especially close when we reach sign 5, because sign 5 is the one that people with high-functioning anxiety are most likely to be proud of, and it is, clinically, one of the most costly things on this list.
Stay with me to sign 5. What you hear there may reframe something you have spent years calling a strength. Sign 1. Your mind is never fully off. Not during dinner, not during a film you chose specifically because you wanted to stop thinking, not even during sleep, because sleep, for people with high-functioning anxiety, is often the time the mind chooses to process everything it couldn't reach during the day. Clinical psychologist Dr. Susan Nolan Hoeksema at Yale University spent decades researching what she called rumination, the repetitive, involuntary cycling of thoughts about problems, past events, and future threats. Her findings were unambiguous. Chronic ruminators are not solving problems, they are rehearsing them. The brain under chronic anxiety activates the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for planning, anticipating, and problem-solving, in the absence of any actual problem that requires solving. It is a fire alarm that goes off not because there is smoke, but because there might be, somewhere, eventually, if something goes wrong that you didn't prepare for. The exhaustion this produces is real. Not the exhaustion of someone who did too much, the exhaustion of someone whose nervous system never fully came to rest, even during the hours that were supposed to be for rest. Sign 2. You overthink everything, but you call it being thorough. There is an important neurological distinction between problem-solving and overthinking, and most people with high-functioning anxiety have spent years confusing the two. Problem-solving is goal-directed. It takes a specific, defined challenge. Here is the situation, here are the variables, here are the options, and works toward resolution. When resolution is reached, the thinking stops. Overthinking does not stop. It cycles, it adds variables, it revisits conclusions already reached, it constructs worst-case scenarios not to prepare for them, but to experience the anticipatory fear of them, which the anxious brain, counterintuitively, finds more tolerable than uncertainty. Neuroscientists Joseph Ledoux's research on the amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, explains why. The anxious brain has learned that perceived control over a feared outcome reduces the distress of not knowing what will happen. Overthinking feels like control. It is not control. It is the illusion of control dressed up as diligence. And the cost of that illusion is the hours, the mental energy, and the quality of presence that the overthinking consumes without ever producing the certainty it was searching for. Sign 3. You're always preparing for the worst, and you call it being realistic. Ask someone with high-functioning anxiety whether they are pessimists, and most of them will say no. They will say they are realists, pragmatists, people who simply prefer to be prepared. And in moderate doses, this is healthy. Anticipating obstacles, planning for contingencies, thinking ahead, these are adaptive behaviors that serve real functions in a complex world. But there is a threshold beyond which preparation stops being adaptive and becomes its own source of suffering. And the marker of that threshold is not how much you prepare, it is whether the preparation brings relief. For someone with high-functioning anxiety, the preparation rarely brings relief, because the point of the preparation was never actually to solve the problem, it was to quiet the alarm. And the alarm, in a nervous system tuned to chronic threat, does not quiet. It simply finds the next scenario that hasn't been prepared for yet. Psychologist Aaron Beck, the founder of cognitive behavioral therapy, described this pattern as catastrophic thinking, the habitual tendency to scan for the worst possible interpretation of any ambiguous situation and to treat that interpretation as the most likely one, not as a conscious choice, as a default setting that the nervous system runs automatically in the background of everything else. If you are watching this and something is landing, if you are recognizing a pattern you have been carrying for a long time without a name for it, like this video right now. And write in the comments, "I am not fine," and that is okay. Because naming it just that is where every genuine recovery begins. Not with a diagnosis, not with a treatment plan, with the moment you stop calling it something else and let it be what it actually is. Write it. I am not fine, and that is okay. I'll be reading every single one. Sign 4. You cannot say no, and you call it being caring. People-pleasing is one of the most widely misunderstood responses in relational psychology. From the outside, and often from the inside, it looks like generosity, like warmth, like someone who genuinely prioritizes the needs of others. In clinical terms, it is a fear response. Dr. Harriet Lerner, clinical psychologist and author of The Dance of Fear, describes people-pleasing as anxiety management by another name. The person who cannot say no is not primarily motivated by care for the other person. They are motivated by the anticipatory distress of what will happen if they say no, the imagined disappointment, the possible conflict, the fear that the relationship will not survive a boundary. The yes is not generosity. The yes is the cheaper option in a nervous system that has decided the cost of no is too high to pay. What this produces over time is a life that is increasingly organized around other people's needs and decreasingly organized around your own, not because you chose that configuration, but because your anxiety chose it for you, one small surrender at a time. Sign 5. Your productivity is driven by fear, not passion, and you have called it ambition. This is the one. This is the sign that people with high-functioning anxiety are most likely to have built an entire identity around. You work hard, you deliver, you set high standards, and you meet them. And when people compliment your drive, your work ethic, your reliability, there is a part of you that receives that compliment with something that doesn't quite feel like pride. Because you know, somewhere beneath the accomplishment, that you did not do it because you wanted to. You did it because the thought of not doing it was unbearable. Clinical psychologist Dr. Brené Brown distinguishes between what she calls wholehearted achievement effort that comes from genuine engagement, curiosity, and intrinsic motivation, and perfectionism-driven performance, which she describes as fundamentally a shame avoidance strategy, not a pursuit of excellence, a defense against the fear of being seen as not enough. Neuroscientist Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, in his landmark work, The Body Keeps the Score, goes further, arguing that chronic stress and threat activation are stored not just psychologically, but somatically, in the muscles, the posture, the breathing pattern, the chronic tension that people with long-term anxiety often don't even notice anymore, because it has become the baseline of how a body feels. The achievement is real. The cost of how it was produced is also real, and the cost compounds every year that it goes unnamed. Sign 6. You need everything to be in order, and you call it being organized. There is a specific relationship between anxiety and control that manifests in many people with high-functioning anxiety as an intense sensitivity to disorder, physical, logistical, relational. The environment needs to be a certain way before you can relax. The plan needs to be confirmed before you can enjoy what the plan is for. The conversation needs to have gone a certain way before you can stop replaying it. And when these things are out of order, when the environment is chaotic, the plan is uncertain, the conversation ended ambiguously, the distress this produces is disproportionate to what the situation actually warrants. Clinical research on anxiety disorders consistently identifies intolerance of uncertainty as one of the core maintaining mechanisms of chronic anxiety. Not the feared outcomes themselves, but the inability to tolerate not knowing how things will turn out. The need for resolution that anxiety creates is satisfied, temporarily, by imposing order on the environment, on the schedule, on the people and situations that the anxious mind cannot afford to leave to chance. Sign 7. You feel guilty when you rest.
Rest, for someone with high-functioning anxiety, is rarely restful, because rest, genuine, unstructured, purposeless rest, activates the exact psychological conditions that anxiety is most threatened by. Stillness, unoccupied time, the absence of a task that confirms you are being productive enough, present enough, responsible enough. The guilt that arrives when you sit down without purpose, that is not conscience. That is anxiety finding the next available lever to pull. It has learned that productivity silences it temporarily, so it has made productivity feel like safety and rest feel like dereliction. Psychiatrist Dr. Judson Brewer, whose research at Brown University focuses on the neuroscience of habit and anxiety, describes this as the anxiety habit loop, where the relief that comes from staying busy reinforces the belief that busyness is what keeps the anxiety at bay, when in reality, busyness is what the anxiety feeds on to stay alive. 7 signs. A mind that never fully turns off. Overthinking disguised as thoroughness. Catastrophizing disguised as realism. People-pleasing disguised as care. Productivity driven by fear disguised as ambition. The need for control disguised as organization. And the inability to rest disguised as dedication, disguised as who you are. None of these signs mean you are broken. None of them mean you have failed. What they mean is that you have been operating under a level of internal pressure that most people around you cannot see, and that you have become so skilled at managing it that even you have stopped recognizing it as pressure and started calling it personality. It is not your personality. It is a nervous system that learned, at some point, usually early, usually in response to an environment that rewarded performance and penalized uncertainty, that the only safe way to exist was to stay one step ahead of everything that could go wrong. That learning kept you safe then. It is costing you now. And the fact that you have carried it this far, this successfully, this invisibly, is not evidence that you don't need support. It is evidence of how hard you have been working just to feel okay. If this video gave you language for something you have been living without language for, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to this channel, because every week we go deep on the psychology of how we actually experience the world, not how we perform it. You are allowed to put the armor down, not all at once, but you are allowed to start.